In the early hours of 31st of October 2025, two elderly Zambian women in their 60s were brutally attacked in Malawi, Mjinji district, Lipunga village, located near the border between Malawi and Zambia. One woman died on the spot. The other woman died later from her injuries at a hospital in the border town of Chipata, Zambia. Malawians and Zambians usually have good-hearted banter online on various issues. They generally consider themselves cousins separated by a borderline. But a small number of netizens online from Zambia were so angry with the murderers so that they called for the bashing of Malawians in Zambia. To be clear, these were only a small number of netizens among thousands. So, this was not representative of the majority at all. However, these words were spoken and it did spark a debate. Unusual for the two sister countries, it just shows how such issues can escalate into something else. Welcome to True Crime Malawi, or simply TCM. Here, we tell Malawi's most shocking and important stories with truth, dignity, and respect. We don't sensationalize tragedy, we honor the victims, we analyze the evidence, and we ask the hard questions not to accuse but to understand. And soon we will start a series called TCM Africa, where we will discuss crimes from around Africa in addition to our core Malawian content on this channel, which is exciting for us. Now, let's get back to the story. To understand this story fully, we need to understand the relationship between Malawi and Zambia. They are not distant neighbors. They are closely connected by history, by trade, and by people. Malawi and Zambia both became independent in the 1960s. At some point, they were one country as part of the three-country colonial federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland, with the other country being Zimbabwe. For decades, their citizens have moved freely across the border to trade, work, and visit family. In many border areas, the line between the two countries feels almost invisible. Languages are shared, markets are shared, families are shared. A trader from Zambia going into Malawi is not seen as a stranger, and a Malawian crossing into Zambia is not seen as foreign. This closeness is exactly why informal or suitcase trade thrives. Beans grown in Malawi are sold in Zambia. Maize bought in Zambia feeds families in Malawi. Trust has always been the foundation of this relationship. Zambians often banter Malawians that Malawi is a poor province of Zambia, and Malawians often remind their neighbors that the majority of their presidents came from Malawi. A bit of back and forth, all good-hearted of course. Agnes Baria and Jane Lungu were just two Zambian women trying to make a living. From what we know, they were in their early to mid-60s. Not young women, but grandmothers. Not a lot is known about them as expected, as they were from a low-income strata. Unfortunately, information for our less privileged is usually hard to come by. This case is no different. There are no pictures of these two women available online. So we have generated some pictures to represent these women. But what we do know is this. Agnes and Jane were elderly but robust, informal, or some call it suitcase traders if you like. They traveled between Malawi and Zambia buying agricultural produce. So that is beans, maize, groundnuts, food that feeds families. This is not an easy life. It means waking up early, carrying cash, traveling long distances, sleeping in unfamiliar places, trusting people you barely know. Most women who do this trade are not chasing wealth. They are chasing stability, things others may take for granted: school fees, rent, food, survival. Agnes and Jane did what thousands of women across Malawi and Zambia do every single week. They moved where opportunity was. They relied on hosts because rural villages do not have hotels. Some places have these dingy rest houses which can feel unsafe at times. There is no evidence that they took unnecessary risks. They were doing what experience had taught them was normal. Lipunga village is quiet. It sits in Mchinji district in central Malawi, not far from the Zambian border. It is the kind of place where people know each other, where strangers are noticed. Agnes Baria and Jane Lungu traveled there for one reason only: business. This time they were looking to buy 7 bags of beans at a cheaper price and resell them in Zambia for a profit. Nothing illegal, nothing risky, at least not on the surface. Agnes and Jane had made plans to look for a small rest house where they could spend a couple of days or so while they were doing their business. They had identified a small but dingy rest house. They were not so keen to use it, but it seems their choices were limited. The owner of the rest house, whom I will call Mr. Pili, had somehow a bit of a temper at times. Generally a good host, but could flip at a moment's notice. The 2 women agreed to be very careful with him and do everything not to cross the man while they were staying at his rest house. They devised ways to ensure they were on his good side at all times. Meanwhile, Mr. Piri cleaned and set up the room for the visitors. Mr. Pili was particularly upset that day by a guest who had taken off early without paying. He was not in a good mood but was trying to keep it together for the customers. But he was boiling inside. The 2 women from Zambia arrived at Lipunga village, Mchinji, on 29th of October 2025. Agnes and Jane stayed in Lipunga for 3 days. 3 days of conversation, 3 days of eating together, 3 days of trust slowly forming. Nothing happened on the first night, nothing happened on the second. If there were warning signs, they were invisible. The man helped them arrange plans to move the beans to the main road. He acted like a host, like a protector, and because nothing bad happened at first, the women relaxed. But that is how danger works sometimes. It waits. It was around midnight on the 3rd day. That is when everything changed. According to some sources, the man they trusted was not alone. He was allegedly with 2 other accomplices. The story, though, changes here according to the source. Most news articles allege multiple assailants. 1 or 2 indicate that he acted alone. So we are not 100% sure. As the case progresses, more accurate details will come to light on the number of participants. But where the story is at the moment, in my books, he seemed to have acted alone. The multiple assailants' alibi might have been invented by the perpetrator to share blame around. What followed, though, was not a robbery gone wrong. It was extreme violence. First, boiling water. I'm just not so sure why he would choose boiling water. That's just diabolical. Beyond measure. It is evil. One of the women was poured with the boiling water. Then the weapons came out, a metal bar and an axe. Blows landed again and again. The kind of violence meant not just to steal, but to break, to kill. The violence in this case was outrageous beyond comprehension. What killed Agnes Baria, according to the police, was a stab in the neck amidst the frantic attack. She died on the spot, in Malawi, in a village where she had believed she was safe. Jane Lungu survived the initial brutal, violent attack. The reason she survived is that neighbors heard the screaming from the house and knocked on the door to intervene. That is when the attack stopped. But Jane was barely alive at this point, hanging on to life. The criminal or criminals fled the house after hearing knocks from neighbors. The intention was clear. It was to kill her too. Jane was in critical condition. Her injuries were severe. Her condition unstable. She was evacuated across the border into Zambia to Chipata Central Hospital. Doctors fought to save her life, but the violence was too much. Jane Lungu later died from her injuries, away from the place where she had been attacked, away from the friend she had traveled with. Two women left home together, neither returned. So the question is, who murdered the two women? Was it Mr. Pili with his temper? Did he go into a rage after slight provocation, who was already angry from an area guest who had not paid? Let's rewind the story to the day the women arrived at Lipunga village on the 29th of October 2025. On their way to the dingy rest house, Mr. Pili's, something drastically changed the fate of their journey. The two women were introduced to a man who seemed helpful. His name is Chola Bwalia, a 60-year-old gentleman, originally from Garden House, Lusaka, a man who shared a last name with Agnes Bwalia. Some have claimed the two also happened to be related, somehow, apart from sharing the same last name, but that is unconfirmed. Chola Bwalia was well known and trustworthy man in the village, who had become part of the furniture. He was married to a Malawian woman. Though he came from Zambia, he had been accepted into the village like one of their own. Chola Bwalia offered them what many traders depend on in rural areas: a place to stay and help with transport logistics. No dingy rest house, no dealing with Mr. Pili seemed like a perfect deal. So they accepted his hospitality. That decision would cost them their lives, for it was Mr. Chola Bwalia who murdered the women that night. Now here is the detail that still shocks many people. The motive was robbery. According to Chola Bwalia, he had planned to steal the 7 bags of beans and sell them in Zambia himself to make money. He had planned to dig shallow graves for these two women and bury them. And in his planning, no one would have known what happened to the women. A perfect crime in his eyes. But after he was interrupted, what was stolen? So he got away with a black bag containing a smartphone, painkillers, and about 1,000 kwacha. I'm sure it was Zambian kwacha, not Malawian kwacha, as 1,000 Malawi kwacha is pretty much worthless. 2 lives destroyed for an amount of money that could not even change a life. This was not desperation, this was cruelty. After the attack, the suspect vanished. He ran away and crossed the border back into Zambia. For weeks, he was on the run. Malawian and Zambian police launched a cross-border manhunt. This case mattered because it touched 2 countries, 2 legal systems, 2 grieving communities. On December 24th, 2025, Christmas Eve, Zambian police found him, not hiding in a forest, not crossing another border, but they tracked him to the Zambian capital city of Lusaka, believing he had disappeared into the crowd. The police arrested him and was taken to Chipata Central Police Station. He was charged with murder. During interrogation, details of the attack reportedly emerged. Police are still investigating whether there were 2 friends mentioned in early reports will also be charged. Or are they even real? Are they made up? So far, we haven't found any traces of the 2 friends. This case is not just about murder, it is about risk. Across Malawi, Zambia, and much of Southern Africa, informal traders, especially women, travel with cash into remote areas. They rely on hosts. They trust strangers. They sleep where they can. There are no contracts, no guarantees, just human trust. And criminals know this. They believe borders will protect them, that once they cross, the case will disappear. In this story, that belief was wrong. Agnes Barrier died instantly. Jane Lungu suffered longer. Both deaths were violent. Both deaths were unnecessary. Both deaths happened because trust was exploited. This is not just a crime story, it is a warning. Sometimes the most dangerous person is not the stranger on the road. Sometimes it is the host who offers you a place to sleep. For True Crime Malawi, TCM, this case reminds us that ordinary journeys can turn deadly and that justice does not always stop at a border. Two elderly women struggling to earn a living, Agnes Barrier and Jane Lungu, went to buy beans. They never came home. And that is something we must never forget. Alright folks, that's all for today. Crime Malawi, or simply TCM. Have a good one. Have a safe new year. We are looking forward to do bigger and better things on this channel in this year. So do not forget to subscribe to TCM. See ya.